Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we're going to be interviewing Senator Laura Acasio. Conducting the interviews tonight are Phil Barnes and Makala Ikuchi. Laura, I think we'll just start out by having you introduce yourself and maybe tell us why you're choosing to run for senator.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everyone, both on this panel and also live stream in the community. Mahalo for being here and mahalo for being interested in civics and what we have to offer. My name is Laura Acasio. I currently represent Senate District 1, which is Greater Hilo, basically around mid Panaeva, where Steinbach and the Zoo Road are, all the way to Honolulu Stream, which is just about 2 miles outside of the Singing Bridge, and then all the way, all of Keaukaha and Panaeva, all the way up through Hilo to Kaumana. I was appointed the day before legislative session opened in 2021 by Governor Ige to replace to fill the vacancy from Kai Kahele as he went to DC as our elect congressman. And so it's been an amazing experience of a lot of learning and growth. So I am originally from California. I've lived in Hawaii for 26 years. I have 2 children, both go to Kamehameha schools in Keau, and let's see, I've been a participant in the Democratic Party on a local level and as well as the State Central Committee since 2016, and have been active in civic space my whole life, actually, as part of our upbringing. It was just part of normal dinner table conversation and staying informed about on a local level, act locally, think globally kind of concepts. And I really feel like that has been a catalyst for developing who I am and then leading me to this position and what I bring to the table. A lot of my value system really resides in a place of listening to community and also being able to be attentive to concerns and needs of preservation within the community. And I'm really intrigued right now by concepts around regenerative agriculture, regenerative tourism, and basically the shift that I see us in experiencing right now, not only in civic space, but in our living environment of really recognizing where we're at with climate change and our impacts on the planet that we resource from. And so, one of my favorite quotes nowadays is the fruits of the new economy must directly benefit those who were most disadvantaged by the old economy. And as we transition, I feel like part of my role is to make sure to raise these conversations in civic space and also come from a place of civic leadership rather than politics. And so here I am. Mahalo for having me, and I look forward to this evening's dialogue and our engagement. So thank you, folks, for all you do.
Thank you, Laura. Phil or Michaela, would you like to start out with our interview?
I can start off with the first question.
Thank you.
So, Senator Acasio, thank you for being here today and giving your lovely introduction. You're wondering, have you advocated for your community and what community projects have you been working on?
Okay, where do I start? In a 1.5 time, we hit the ground running. Actually, let me start before I became Senator of Hilo. And one of the projects that was really close and dear to my heart was helping and being an integral part of visioning and starting and implementing and seeing out the process of starting a community garden at the Boys and Girls Club in Hilo. So when I moved from Oahu to Hilo, I was initially working in the mala at Navahio Kalaniopuu. And I landed that via a friend who was already working in the mala, and I got to help her start to set up hydroponics and greenhouse classes and set up for them to be able to learn agriculture and be able to share produce with their community. And I was already heavily influenced by what had transpired in Waianae with Ma'o Farms and their internship project with students to cultivate food for the community. And so when I had moved over, I still carried a lot of that inspiration from Ma'o Farms and from Gary and Kukui, Mama Care Fourth, who were instrumental in starting that project, and how feeding our community was incredibly important. And so when we saw the property at Boys and Girls Club, because I happened to live nearby, there was a group of us that started just envisioning what that could look like in terms of an asset for teaching garden to the students in the nearby schools. You already have boys, you have kids that come there after school, and to bring them outside and be able to engage them in agriculture and teaching them how to grow food. And we had all kinds of programs and projects of learning, like anything from how to husk a coconut to, ukulele classes, to murals, to making smoothies and making food out of the produce that they created. So at any rate, transitioning, and we basically just kept having meetings and met with the right people, and eventually proposed it to the board at the Boys and Girls Club. They accepted, and we launched a community garden that had so many people coming through and so many stakeholders that would utilize that. We were in partnership with University of Hawaii, a bunch of their education department classes, women's studies classes. We had the work line from the prison coming in and helping out with different things. We had Goodwill Industries that would bring their clients and do work days. But it was just a really huge opportunity for community building as one. And the soil science department at University of Hawaii was present, and agriculture teachers had brought their students. And again, then we linked up with students, teachers at Connections Public Charter School and Hilo Intermediate. And at one point in that, maybe it was about 7 years where we had the active community garden going. We had a greenhouse that was producing lettuce and so many opportunities for cultural enrichment and protocol. And just really, actually, one of the biggest thing was we were trying to cultivate with the students is a love of learning and to be able to be joyful and learn in the garden and know how to grow food and just cultivate their relationship. And so that was one of the big pieces to developing and helping community grow. And I bring those kinds of experiences now into the Senate, and we're working on waste to wealth programs for reuse programs within our community, tied in with conversations that are happening in the tourism sector and the visitor sector around regenerative tourism and what that actually looks like and what we can implement as a community and be that example that we wish to actually see. And we're working on, we have actually quite a few projects. So I think I'll pause for now, and you can tell me if I can keep going, because I know each question is a little bit timed.
No, that was wonderful.
Hey.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
Laura.
you so much.
Yeah. Oh, I would just want to share, I don't know if this will be quick, but there was a moment in time I just have to share about this heyday in the garden where we had so much food growing and so many kids and community groups coming through to help, volunteer. And it was Hilo High School. It was all these boys from Hilo Intermediate, sorry, and they would come every Wednesday. And we had a chicken coop set up, and they had made a game into going through digging. They were turning the compost pile, And in turning the compost pile, they kept seeing centipedes. And one of them found, well, I think someone had told them, you know, the chickens really love centipedes. So they would grab the centipede, they had gloves on, they would grab the centipede and run it to the chicken coop and throw it in the chicken coop, and all the chickens would go crazy, right? And then one of them, whoever would get it, would go run into the hen house. It was just a little space that they could get through. And, you know, and then once it went through the door, all the boys would yell touchdown. Like it was this incredible celebration, right? And then they would just do it again and again, like touchdown. And just to witness even their joy in that, and these are, you know, they could be doing all kinds of things after school, but instead, you know, they were really, really engaged. But I just have to say that was a really beautiful moment in terms of teaching. And so
that's a beautiful memory.
Thank
Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
and for what you're doing for the community. That's lovely. Phil, would you like to ask the next question?
Yeah, good evening, Senator. The next question deals with values and why you're running, but this is a little bit different. So what I'd like to kind of turn a little bit and say, what irons do you have going in the fire over there that you're dying to get back? What kind of things do you think you can, what are you shooting to do in your second term?
Well, as you know, a lot of it is meeting people, learning the departments, learning with the capacity and where we can, you know, integrate a lot of the ideas we're implementing. One of the things that I do bring, and of course, we're going to hear all politicians say this, but I'm going to be it, is integrity and truth telling. This is so part of my accomplishment in that, I feel like, and what I want to bring continually to this position is it's very easy to get into a position of trading. And you know, I do have quite a few mentors over here in the state capitol who are seasoned legislators and coming from a civic space, we recognize that once you get into any kind of trading, you know, it's pretty much you cannot get out. And so to recognize that every decision and every relationship is part of that, you know, that choice, and that if we compromise value especially for any kind of personal gain, even if it's in trading for another thing, rather than have it be the integrity of the idea or the necessity of and the justice involved in certain issues, then we run into sticky issues. And so in terms of my own accomplishments within this position, I would like to continue to build relationships based on you know, collaborative efforts to solve problems within our community. And that also means making sure to look at and participate in how to make the legislative process and our positions of power ultimately accountable to transparency, to community interests, community voice. One of the biggest things that I've learned in this process too is how to bring community voice in. And one of the big ways to engage that is to be able to make sure to inform community what's happening within the walls, right? So in doing that is to make sure to set up systems of communication with folks, not only folks who are already engaged, but also engaging more people in the civic process. So part of that means whether I'm a legislator in the future or not, that means making sure that I'm doing drop-in classes at our high school to teach folks the basics of how to provide how to track bills, how to provide testimony, how to create bills. And so part of that then also is making sure I have interns in my office that are able to learn that process, but also then share it out as well. So kind of setting up all the systems for communication that allow the electorate and our community to be informed about what kinds of things we are doing.
Thank you, Senator. Michaela, our next question.
Our next question is, what are the critical issues that have arisen in the district you will represent that could be addressed by the state legislature?
So we have quite a few as well, but one of them, okay, so we've been working on a very important critical infrastructure in particularly in Hilo, which is our Hilo wastewater treatment facility. It's incredibly aged. It's in very poor condition. And I introduced a few bills actually to try to address that and get funding from the state so that those state funds could be matched with county funds as well as federal infrastructure monies, so that we can build a state-of-the-art resource recovery wastewater treatment center. So raising a lot of conversation really around the importance of it and actually the emergency of it, rather than just be complacent and feel like, oh, we have to wait till next year or not address this issue. For me, I recognize it as a really important critical infrastructure that is near failing. And if it does fail, we are in a really precarious predicament, and then it becomes a state issue, because if we're releasing raw sewage into the ocean, that is definitely a statewide public health issue as well as environmental issue. So, and also just the nature of that emergency and working with the county directly to, help, be prepared for something like that in the case that. And so just helping to bring a lot of attention to the situation as well as trying to come up with solutions. So we did have a few solutions via bills, and those did not progress, as sometimes the nature of it needs to be heard by the chair, and I'm not a chair at this point. And so, my influence in that was only to some degree. And then what we ended up doing in the process is searching out different ways that we could integrate the county involvement and ask them. So the county ended up asking for CIP requests, so capital improvement project monies, again, for matching. And so far, the communication has been going well, and we have to see if it can come out in the final budget. But again, really raising that alarm in terms of how important this is. And even though I think I don't want to take away any of the importance at all of Red Hill and the contamination issue there, it really is quite similar, except in this case, it would be the state and the county that are playing a hand in the responsibility of not repairing it, because we can see how imminent a failure is. And if we don't act, then I feel like then we're very much responsible. And so instead of sitting there, okay, what do we do, and move forward and try to pull in the money so that we can get that built. And I have to say that working with the county has been really wonderful on that, because they've been extremely involved, really responsive, coming up with the plans that and doing the footwork that they need to be doing. So I think a big piece is working collaboratively on all levels of government, right? Rather than, because I found that a lot of, in the very beginning, everyone's like, why that's a county issue. And then the county's like, that's a state issue. And it's like, no, actually it's all of our issue. And so.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Phil, our next question.
Okay, yeah, the next question deals with affordable housing. And what paradigm shifting solutions can you offer so that the rising real estate prices and values do not correspondingly increase the cost of housing and the cost of living pushing out locals from being able to afford any housing?
So this is an extremely huge, important issue. I absolutely see this. So a couple of things that don't 100% address the really root of what you're speaking of, Phil, but I will mention them first and then go back to that, is we have put forth twice now, in 2 years in a row, a bill to find empty homes. And when we assess just right now, based on the empty homes, even that exist just in Kaka'ako, $500 million could be collected on a 1% surcharge to property tax. And so part of that is being willing to raise taxes on wealth and then use those. So the empty homes fine, for example, is the empty homes are contributing. The theory is that empty homes are also contributing to the lack of affordable, the availability, right, of affordable house, because it's sitting there vacant, it's occupying space, but it's vacant. And so the theory is if one can afford to have a house, a home property vacant, especially as it's high end, that they're not necessarily going to be houseless or go bankrupt just because they have a 1% fee on their property tax. And then to be able to use that money to help with, maybe help folks be sheltered, whether it's help them with rent or build truly affordable housing. So that's one thing. Another one is a good cause eviction. So again, it's around the subject, but it's not exactly to your point, which is we put forth a bill, good cause eviction, and as well as a not making sure that we didn't have discrimination on Section 8 housing, because again, that's what we're finding too, in combination with the lack of housing available, is that folks are being discriminated against because of their Section 8 status, public housing. So those things. The actual issue, I mean, really to address what you raised specifically, is to put moratoriums and put limits on who can purchase houses in Hawaii. The issue that I have come across, which I haven't figured out how to address it within the state of Hawaii system, is cannot discriminate against somebody within the United States in terms of them purchasing a house in Hawaii. And so, or purchasing property. So I really am open to all kinds of suggestions, because I feel like this is a really important place where we need to get radical. And again, going back to that piece is to be willing to tax wealth. So whether it's luxury tax or be able to really tax high-end income and utilize that money. But again, I know it's not exactly addressing the specific what you're talking about, Phil.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator.
Tough one.
Yeah, so it's definitely complicated, and I recognize the issue completely, and I want to find solutions to that issue. The roadblock that I have come up with in this legal system particularly is that it's unconstitutional to say someone from within the United States within the state it's unconstitutional to say that someone can't purchase property.
Hey, Michaela, our next question.
Okay, this question relates to Native Hawaiian issues. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Native Hawaiians today on Hawai'i Island? And what do you plan to do about it?
Again, that goes to land use, probably land use and equal access to justice. I mean, when we look at places on Hawai'i Island that are higher in population of Native Hawaiians, you find refinery, you find the airport, we find the sewage treatment plant, all of these things, we find the landfill. And so I think that making sure that that conversation is front and center in terms of future development. And again, going back to that, where the fruit of the new economy needs to absolutely go towards those who, who were most disadvantaged and who are, and so part of that is access to education, equal access, and yeah, that's a huge one. And I think honestly, to be honest, is to listen and to hear and to involve Native Hawaiians in the conversation, in all of the conversations, because I feel like that is one of the pieces historically missing is a lack of voice and a lack of, especially within the walls of the Capitol. I find that it's becoming increasingly important, but that listening to Native Hawaiian voice is not necessarily the priority of many of my colleagues. And so I think that's a big piece, is to engage and to not only to listen, but then to advocate for.
Thank you. Next question from Phil Barnes.
Yeah, Senator, there seems to be more than a typical amount of infrastructure money floating around these days. And what are your top 3 priorities for allocation of infrastructure funding?
Okay, so I already mentioned wastewater treatment. That's definitely priority number 1. The other is affordable housing, and making sure that that's available for our communities.
Third one.
What's the third?
Oh, we're going with 3. Sorry, looking over. Let's say, I mean, resource recovery is huge, right? So different aspects. One of the projects that we've been working on within Hilo is waste to wealth. So really building reuse programs within our community so that we can, divert waste from our landfill and have systems set up that we are not actually producing as much waste. Another thing with that, so back to wastewater treatment and being able to utilize systems of resource recovery. So recovering the water, reclaimed water, utilizing that for potentially for light industry or other agriculture, a huge priority for our office is based around food security. And so building infrastructure within, so more like hubs, right? So it's distributed and decentralized, but food hubs that are based around community centers that could also be very much tied in with decentralized composting facilities, small scale, like artisan scale composting facilities, farmers market, basically food hub community centers throughout our communities that where you have access even potentially to community kitchens, right? So that many of the small value added products can be processed and made within those community centers, basically. And so I feel like tying that, which is a huge priority for us, is food security, is tying all of those ideas back in and utilizing infrastructure monies to really build our networks. I mean, Hawai'i Island is already extremely, I would say, fortunate in that there are a lot of young farmers. One of the things that we often hear is that, oh, there's the average age of a farmer is 65, but the reality is for us on Hawai'i Island, there's a huge resurgence of younger farmers within the Korean natural farming movement, et cetera, that are really working hard to build resilient communities through decentralized food hubs and distribution centers, So I think that is definitely a priority as well.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay. What economic opportunities are you most excited about on Hawai'i Island right now?
Okay, let me think about that one for a second. I guess that same thing that goes back to value-added products. We were recently at a site visit to CTAR's Go Farm, okay, with Riton, and he was sharing with us not only the nature of their farm, which actually is growing farmers, and they basically have a program. I forget how many weeks they go through the program, but it's a certain amount of time that they cultivate a plot and they learn, the business nature of farming, marketing. The students come in and they have to put together a CSA project, so a community supported agriculture. They sell boxes of their produce and provide that to community. And so one of the things that I was really struck by that is that someone is working on pigeon pea miso as opposed to soybean miso. Those are the kinds of things that really inspired me, because I've never had miso, but I would definitely purchase it, especially because it's locally grown. And so tying in systems of reuse programs with that here's a perfect opportunity for this young entrepreneur who is farming, is growing food locally for local consumption, to take that product and make it value added and sell it locally. And then technically, if we have reuse bottle washing or container washing, that there's then a place where I can, if I'm purchasing it as a consumer, then I can return that back, that whatever, most likely I'm thinking glass bottle in that case, or glass jar, return it back, and it goes, back into the system, and that's one less container that gets thrown away because one less container was consumed. But yet here we are supporting this young entrepreneur as well in her endeavor to, create these value-added products grown and consumed on our island. And so I think that, again, going back to the need for resilient communities and food security, is that those kinds of endeavors are huge, I think, for our community, especially as we go towards our state's goals to reduce our reliance on imported food and to meet those benchmarks for providing food for our community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next question.
Yes, this next area you've already touched on several times, but this will give you a little more time to deal with it. The next of our platform issues is food security and agriculture. And this has been discussed a lot in here already, but you're going to have a little more time. So what would be your definition of food security or food sovereignty for Hawaii? Okay, how would you define that? And then how would you implement programs that would allow this to come about?
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll keep doing more of what we're all striving, many of us are doing. So more community-based farms. So one of the things that we're looking at with different farmers is that the need for setting up machine sharing, and also so more like co-op style farming, where you have maybe access to a certified kitchen that multiple stakeholders utilize. And yeah, so that's really important to this whole piece, and how we as a state can contribute to that is there was actually quite a few excellent farm to school bills that didn't get heard in the Senate, and they were passed over from the House, and that had recently died, actually, unfortunately. However, working in, there's maybe different capacities to see how we can continue to support and fund it, even if the bill version, that's one method to do things, right? And to get appropriations. And then there are others. So, working with, state agencies in terms of purchasing food for local consumption is a really huge one. Working to allow, one of the things in talking with a lot of farmers in our community is one of the things that would allow them to be able to thrive and contribute more food to the system is to be able to live on their land in small farm dwellings, which is not to be confused with gentleman farms that maybe have one macnut tree and a huge estate. So obviously taking those things into consideration, how to navigate the laws around land use, which some of which are county issues and some also apply to the state. So, but really trying to look at what would help support our farmers and move in that direction. It's a little bit different, but there are a few bills that we've been supporting throughout this session and even last session, which is branding issues for example, for our Kona coffee farmers, and getting them to be able to have a 51% at least, but truth in labeling, right? And not only truth in labeling, but having to say, like, you have to have at least 51% of Kona coffee in order to label it as Kona coffee. Currently it's 10%. And the Kona coffee farmers have been asking for that for years. They've been working at that. Another piece to it is integrating integrated pest management into a lot of funding, because okay, so first of all, let's back up. Biosecurity and a need for an agriculture plan, a statewide agriculture plan, is incredibly important, especially moving forward, where in 2023, the Farm Bill will be up in the federal side. And so to make sure that the language that our federal delegation is able to advocate for the kind of language that needs to be in the Farm Bill to help small farms, right? Because if we understand kind of where the Farm Bill is at, and it's been at for years, it's helping these monocrop farms, really large scale corporate farms, and the language in there allows those folks to be subsidized. And we really want to make sure that there's language in there to subsidize small scale farms, because we don't even have, Hawaii doesn't even though we do have some corporate farms, it's not at the scale of the Midwest. And so we don't even fall in, even our largest farms don't even really fall under the provisions that the current Farm Bill provides. And so again, if we as a state have a very clear agriculture plan, and so that's something that I've been working on with different stakeholders, with Congressman Kahele's office, all the way, and other colleagues here and departments, is advocating for us to put together a comprehensive agriculture plan that then we can make sure that we are able to utilize a lot of those subsidies and to benefit from that. And so again, back to integrated pest management, is things like biosecurity is a huge component to what we need to focus on. And it's been like that for years, that we have more restrictions going out of the state than coming in the state. And therefore we get all these, a lot of different pests, right, that wreak havoc on industry, on our agriculture. However, oftentimes we have subsidies that come through on the state level to subsidize pesticide use to deal with these things. And one of the voices that I bring to it, to the state capitol here, is to say, if we're subsidizing pesticide use, which is detrimental ultimately to our environment, then we really also should be looking at other integrated pest management that is, maybe it doesn't poison the watershed, does not kill bees, et cetera, because there are a lot of organic farmers who want to support, who want to address those issues. However, they also need support. And so if we're going to be paying $600 a gallon as a state to a farmer who wants to use a chemical, but yet here we are, if additional fertilizer and soil health and maybe some organic amendments can also address that same pest or issue, then we should also be funding that, because also especially when it comes to fertilizer, that can be sourced locally, and it can support our economy in a much more circular fashion by really helping to bolster that, economy as well. So.
Thank you. Michaela, next question. You're muted.
Thank you. Senator Acasio, this question has to deal with social issues. So which marginalized communities do you consider yourself an advocate for? And what policies do you plan on enacting to support those communities?
So a big piece that we've been growing into is restorative justice. And we look at our justice involved individuals as humans, and that rehabilitation and energies focused on people, not building more prisons, is really, really important. And I feel like we just actually, we work with and learning with, we're learning a lot from programs like Men of Pa'a and other organizations in our community, our unsheltered population, those who are suffering from mental illness and also substance abuse, is, again, like we look at, costs the state $218 a day to incarcerate an individual. And so if we look at providing services that help that recidivism rate decline, or having them go to prison in the first place. So this goes back to even investing in our future via early childhood education, for example, or childcare. If you have two working families on a really low income, they can't afford to send their child to preschool, and then there's all these ramifications that come with that. So making sure that we are supporting working class parents and families. So paid family leave is also incredibly important. Raising the minimum wage, that feels like a no, but it's pulling teeth at this point to get that passed. And honestly, I think while the Senate version of the minimum wage bill was better, I honestly truly think that that's not fast enough. And that we will be able, that our businesses will be resilient. And as a community, again, looking at marginalized community members is to lift them up. Like if we really look at our society and look at our most impoverished, that's a litmus for how good we're doing. And so again, focusing on, those of lowest income, especially advocating for our houseless individuals and those who are struggling, and those who have a house, but they're really struggling with just making ends meet. And so trying to support our families.
All right, we have time for just a couple more questions. Phil?
Okay, this next one deals with our platform on climate change mitigation and adaptation. So Hawaii's top is transportation. What ideas do you have to reduce greenhouse gases emissions from this sector, transportation? Transit-oriented
developments is something that I'm learning a bit more about. And same thing when I hear folks in our community talking about developing a space, for example, Banyan Drive or redeveloping Banyan Drive. A lot of the conversation that I want to bring to that is exactly how to do it in a way that's regenerative and that, for example, is not necessarily based around our need for individual automobile transportation, especially within that sector. And I think same thing with what we noticed with the pandemic when there were, especially in Honolulu, when there weren't as many rental cars, well, they weren't being rented, so they were all parked. That contributed significantly to a lot less, emissions and pollution on the road from transportation. So really looking at how to utilize and bolster our public transportation, and especially around if we're going to have a adequate bus system for it to be, maybe we develop hydrogen and also electric buses, those kinds of things. I know that there are limitations to a lot of those. So in looking at that is something that I need to educate myself more on. But exploring those options and those ideas is really, really important.
Okay. I think we're going to have to wrap up now. Michaela.
Okay. So my last question for you revolves around marine issues. So tens of thousands of Hawaii residents actively oppose the reinstatement of the commercial aquarium trade that only benefits mainland and international corporations. Do you support closing down this industry that traffics in Hawaii's marine wildlife?
Yes, I do. And I think there actually was a bill that we did vote on, because I remember getting an email from someone who was not so happy, who is an aquarium fish, who was not so happy with my vote. I believe from Kohala. So anyway, yes, absolutely, 100%. That was easy because it was only a yes or no question.
Yeah, that was
that's like speed dating of value system and politics.
Really, yeah, it is.
This is like, fire out the questions. But I love
thought
Bill,
we
do you have
could end
one?
on an easier note.
Bill, do you have one last question?
I've gotten through the ones I had
All right.
laid out.
All right. Thank you. This has been terrific. We really appreciate you joining us here today, and good luck on your senatorial run. You do well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Senator Acasio, for coming today.
Yeah,
Thank you, Senator.
All too. And Phil, if you have some ideas on that housing question, I'd love to sit down and brainstorm with you. Because
Okay.
that's a fun.
It is.
Yeah, and we've been working kind of around that, but yeah, if you have ideas, I would love to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for taking the time. I appreciate your inviting me to this forum, and yeah, anytime, please call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha, everyone.